They didn't just cut me out of the will. They cut me out of the family. And I stayed silent, for years. I rebuilt my life alone. Quietly. And in the end, I reclaimed the legacy they tried to bury. If this story feels familiar. If you've ever sat in that same silence, wondering how the people you trusted most could leave you behind. You're not alone. And if someone comes to mind right now. Someone who deserves better. Someone still waiting to be seen. Tap like. Share this with them. And subscribe. Because stories like this? They deserve to be heard. I'm sitting here at my kitchen table, staring at the papers that changed everything. The same table where I used to do homework while my father worked late at his shop. The same table where my mother served me tea the day she erased me from our family's future. Funny how life comes full circle, isn't it? Let me take you back to where it all began. 15 years ago, I was 28, unmarried, and according to my family, a disappointment wrapped in good intentions. While my two brothers were off building their own lives, Mark with his construction company that barely broke even, and David with his series of failed startups, I was the one who stayed. I was the one who drove Dad to his chemo appointments when the cancer came calling. I was the one who held his hand in those sterile hospital rooms that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. I was the one who helped him shower when his pride was too wounded to ask anyone else. Diane, he'd whisper to me during those long nights when the pain kept him awake, you're the strongest one. You always were. I thought that meant something. I thought love was currency in our family. I was wrong. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and casseroles. Everyone kept telling me how sorry they were, how Dad was in a better place now, how I was such a good daughter for staying by his side. But when the last guest left and the flowers started wilting, that's when my mother showed her true face. She sat me down at this very table, her eyes dry as autumn leaves, and slid a manila folder across the wood. Just sign these, honey, she said, her voice as sweet as poisoned honey. Legal paperwork. You know how complicated these things get. I should have read every word. I should have questioned why she was in such a hurry. But I was grieving, exhausted, and I trusted the woman who gave me life. I signed my name on line after line, thinking I was helping settle Dad's affairs. I was signing away my birthright. 3 days later, the truth hit me like a freight train carrying 15 years of lies. Mark called me, drunk on victory and cheap beer. Can you believe it, Diane? Mom gave us everything. The shop, the house, even Dad's watch collection. She said you didn't need it since you'll probably marry some rich guy anyway. The phone slipped from my hand like my entire world was slipping away. I drove to my mother's house, my brother's house now, and found her in Dad's office, boxing up his things with the efficiency of someone erasing evidence. You tricked me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't even look up. I did what was best for this family, Diane. Your brothers have families to support. You're young, educated, pretty enough. You'll find someone to take care of you. What about what Dad wanted? Now she looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Cold calculation. Your father was dying and sentimental. I'm the one who has to live with the practical decisions. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, watching her fold away pieces of the man who raised me to believe in fairness and love. In that moment, I had a choice. I could scream, fight, drag this through the courts for years. I could tear our family apart in public and make everyone pick sides. Or I could walk away with whatever dignity I had left. I chose dignity. You'll regret this, I said quietly. She laughed. Actually laughed. I doubt that, sweetheart. I walked out of that house and never looked back. Not for 15 long years. The next few months were the hardest of my life. I moved into a studio apartment that was smaller than my childhood bedroom. The walls were thin, the neighbors were loud, and the radiator sounded like it was dying every night. But it was mine. Nobody could take it away from me. I got a job as a receptionist at a law firm. $9 an hour to answer phones and file papers for lawyers who made in a day what I made in a month. But I listened. God, did I listen? I absorbed every conversation about estate law, family trusts, and inheritance disputes like I was studying for the most important test of my life. Because I was. By night, I took community college courses in legal studies. By weekend, I volunteered at legal aid clinics, helping other women who'd been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect them. I saw my story reflected in a dozen different faces: mothers cut out by vindictive ex-husbands, daughters erased by sons who believed they deserved more. I wasn't building a career, I tell people now. I was building a life they couldn't take away. Year by year, class by class, client by client, I built something beautiful out of the ashes of my family's betrayal. I opened my own consultancy, Diane Foster Legal Services, specializing in family inheritance disputes and women's rights in estate planning. The universe has a sense of irony, doesn't it? The daughter they thought would amount to nothing became the person other families called when everything fell apart. I helped Sarah, whose stepchildren tried to steal her house after her husband died. I helped Maria, whose brothers convinced their elderly father to sign over his restaurant while he was on pain medication. I helped dozens of women find their voices in courtrooms where their families expected them to stay silent. Each victory felt like justice. Not just for them, but for the 28-year-old girl who'd signed away her future at this kitchen table. 15 years passed. I stopped counting birthdays and started counting lives I'd helped save. I had a career, a beautiful apartment overlooking the river, and a reputation that made powerful men nervous when I walked into their offices. I thought I was done with my old life. I thought I'd moved on completely. Then my phone rang on a Tuesday morning last spring. "Diane? It's your mother." I almost hung up. My finger hovered over the end call button for what felt like an eternity. But something in her voice, something broken and desperate, made me stay on the line. "I need to see you," she whispered, and I could hear her crying. My mother, who I'd never seen shed a tear, was sobbing into the phone. "Please. I know I have no right to ask, but I need your help." 2 days later, I drove back to the house where I grew up. The paint was peeling, the garden was overgrown, and there were legal notices taped to the front door. This wasn't the pristine family home I remembered. This was a monument to bad decisions and broken promises. My mother answered the door looking like she'd aged 30 years instead of 15. She was thin, frail, and her hands shook when she reached out to touch my face. "You look beautiful," she said, her voice cracking. "Successful. Strong. What do you want, Mom?" She invited me in for tea, the same ritual we'd shared thousands of times before everything went wrong. But now the kitchen felt different. Smaller. Sadder. "They lost everything," she said without preamble. "Mark's construction business went under in 2020. He mortgaged the shop to try to save it. David has a gambling problem. They took out loans against the house, against everything your father left us." I sat there, stirring sugar into my tea, waiting for the punchline. "The bank is foreclosing next month. Everything your father worked for, everything I thought I was protecting, it's all gone. And you called me because..." She reached across the table and grabbed my hands. Her skin felt like paper, fragile and ready to tear. "Because I was wrong. God help me, I was so wrong about everything. Your brothers, they were never strong enough to carry this family's legacy. You were. You always were, and I was too proud and too stupid to see it. The words I'd waited 15 years to hear hung in the air between us like smoke from a dying fire. I can't fix this, Mom. Even if I wanted to, it's too late. No, she said, her grip tightening. No, it's not. I've been talking to lawyers, to financial advisors. There's still time to save some of it. The shop isn't gone yet. The house could be restructured. But I need someone who understands this legal maze, someone who knows how to fight these battles. She took a shaky breath. I need you, Diane. I should have trusted you 15 years ago, and I need to trust you now. Please, help me fix what I broke. I could have said no. I could have reminded her of every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every night I cried myself to sleep in that tiny apartment. I could have walked away and let karma finish what it started. But looking at her across that table, I didn't see the woman who betrayed me. I saw the woman who raised me, who taught me to read, who bandaged my scraped knees and celebrated my achievements before she forgot how to love without conditions. I saw my mother, broken and asking for forgiveness. Okay, I said. But we do this my way. No more secrets, no more lies, no more treating me like I'm too naive to handle the truth. She nodded so hard I thought her neck might snap. Anything. Yes, anything. The next 3 months were intensive. I restructured their debts, negotiated with creditors, and found legal loopholes that saved more than anyone thought possible. But more importantly, I spent time with my mother. Real time. We talked about Dad, about her fears, about the sexist attitudes that made her believe sons were more valuable than daughters. I grew up in a different time, she said one evening as we went through old photo albums. I thought I was protecting you by pushing you toward marriage instead of business. I thought the world would be kinder to you that way. The world wasn't kind to me either way, I replied. But I got stronger. She smiled through her tears. Yes, you did. You got stronger than all of us. During those months, she rewrote her will. Properly this time, with lawyers and witnesses and ironclad language that couldn't be misinterpreted or manipulated. She left token amounts to my brothers, enough to show love, not enough to waste, and everything else came to me. This is your father's legacy, she said as we signed the papers. And it should have been yours from the beginning. 3 weeks later, she died peacefully in her sleep. The doctors said it was her heart, that she'd been living on borrowed time for months. But I think she held on just long enough to make things right. The call came on a Monday morning. My brothers, who hadn't spoken to me since the funeral 15 years ago, suddenly wanted to play the grieving family card. We should all be there for the will reading, Mark said when he called. Mom would have wanted us together. I agreed to meet at the lawyer's office. Not because I needed their permission, but because some stories deserve an audience for their ending. They walked in like conquering heroes, talking loudly about dividing assets and splitting proceeds. David had even brought a calculator. They barely acknowledged me sitting in the corner with my own legal folder. Sorry you had to come all this way, Diane, Mark said with fake sympathy. But you know how these things work. Legal stuff is complicated. The lawyer, my lawyer, though they didn't know it yet, cleared his throat and asked everyone to take a seat. Before we begin, he said, I should mention that Mrs. Foster left specific instructions about how this will should be read. She wanted her daughter Diane to handle the proceedings. The confusion on my brothers' faces was almost comical. They looked at each other, then at me, then back at the lawyer like he'd started speaking in tongues. I think there's been a mistake, David said. Diane doesn't handle legal stuff. She's not really involved in family business. I stood up slowly, savoring every second of their growing bewilderment. Actually, I said, opening my folder, I handle quite a lot of legal stuff these days. I run my own firm. Estate planning, inheritance disputes, family law. I've been doing this for over a decade. I pulled out the will and began to read. To my sons Mark and David, I leave my love and my hopes that you'll learn to build your lives on something more solid than entitlement. I leave each of you $50,000, enough to start over, not enough to waste. Their faces went from confusion to shock to something approaching panic. To my daughter Diane, I continued, my voice steady as a judge pronouncing sentence, I leave everything else. The house, the shop, all financial assets, and all personal property. But more than that, I leave you the apology I should have given 15 years ago, and the recognition that you were always the strongest one among us. The silence in that room was deafening. Mark's calculator slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor. This can't be legal, David finally sputtered. She was sick, she wasn't thinking clearly. We can contest this. I smiled, not with cruelty, but with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent 15 years preparing for this exact moment. You're welcome to try, I said. Though I should mention that as an estate planning attorney with an impeccable record, I made sure every single document was ironclad. Mom was evaluated by 3 different doctors who confirmed her mental competency. Every signature was witnessed and notarized. Every clause was carefully crafted to withstand any challenge. I gathered my papers and stood to leave. The house and shop will be transferred to a trust I've established. The trust will convert the shop into a community resource center for women facing family legal disputes. Mom's name will be on a plaque by the door, along with Dad's. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. Oh, and boys? Your $50,000 will come with one condition. You have to complete a financial literacy course before you can access it. Consider it Mom's final attempt to teach you responsibility. I walked out of that office and into the bright afternoon sun, leaving them to process the earthquake that had just restructured their world. But here's the thing about real victory, it doesn't feel like revenge. It feels like justice. It feels like balance being restored to a universe that had tilted too far in the wrong direction. Over the past few months, I've transformed Dad's shop into something beautiful. The Foster Family Legal Resource Center provides free consultations for women navigating family inheritance disputes. We have support groups, educational workshops, and a legal aid clinic staffed by volunteer attorneys. Dad's watch, the one he wanted me to have, hangs in a place of honor on the wall. Next to it is a photo of him and Mom from their wedding day, young and hopeful and believing in forever. Every day, I see women walk through those doors carrying the same pain I once carried. Some are angry, some are broken, some are afraid. But they all leave a little stronger, a little more armed with knowledge and resources. Yesterday, a 25-year-old named Jessica came in. Her stepfather had convinced her dying mother to leave everything to his children from his first marriage. She sat in my office crying, convinced she had no options, no power, no hope. I don't know anything about legal stuff, she sobbed. I'm just a teacher. I don't know how to fight people like this. I handed her a tissue and smiled. 15 years ago, I was just a receptionist who didn't know anything about legal stuff either, I told her. But I learned. And I'll teach you everything you need to know. As I watched understanding dawn in her eyes, that same moment when powerlessness transforms into possibility, I felt my father's presence in the room. I felt my mother's forgiveness. I felt the cosmic rightness of seeds planted in pain finally blooming into purpose. They buried me thinking I was gone. But I was just a seed, learning how to bloom. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you most. If you've ever been told you weren't strong enough, smart enough, or important enough to carry your family's legacy. If you've ever had to choose between bitterness and growth, between revenge and justice, between staying buried and learning to bloom. Know this, your story isn't over. It's just waiting for you to write the ending you deserve. Leave a like if this story touched something in your heart. And share it with someone who needs to know that sometimes the most beautiful flowers grow from the deepest graves. Your story isn't over, it's just waiting to bloom.